I'm going to start admitting people in.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. Anna, can you give us some context as to what grade you're teaching and what year it is for you?
Yeah. I teach first grade at a school in Merrill, Wisconsin. And this is still technically my first year. I started in January last year, so it's like the second half, but it's, up until January, I guess it's still year one.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you can join us. And Lauren, can you give us some context about you?
Hello, I'm a student at Concordia Chicago. I'm a junior, and some Lutheran education students got invited to join the Zoom. So I'm middle grades, math and literacy, and I'm just listening in today.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we did invite all of Concordia universities if they wanted to have their students join in. If they're in the education program, junior, senior year. So come one, come all, right?
Yes, indeed.
Definitely.
I see it is 4 o'clock. So let's open and get started. And since this is our second one of the year, and then turn over to our experts here of guiding you through all kinds of material. I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Director of LCMS School of Ministry, and it is a joy to be with all of you today on what we call it new, but it's kind of the newer, and it doesn't matter if you're in year 0 or year 50, everybody is welcome here to share and talk, and the key elements of the Zoom are teacher support and encouragement. I think Esther and Michaela would agree on that's the key element of all this, is to join together, support and encouragement. So, and it is a joy always on these Zooms to have Esther Edwards. It's always hard, I gotta learn how to do this still after Esther and Michaela changed their last names due to marriage over last year. So Esther is at St. Luke's in Oviedo, Florida, and Michaela Harper. It's hard for me not to say Willoughby. Michaela Harper is with us too. And Michaela's at Pilgrim in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And both of them will be leading the sessions as we go throughout the year, once a month, in support and encouragement for all of you and all of us as we join together in our, as I always like to say, educational ministry for excellence and the opportunities that we all have. I'll open us in prayer, and then I'll send it to Esther and Michaela, who will run everything from here on out after that. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this wonderful and glorious day, and for the opportunity to be together and to share, support, and encourage one another in our ministries as we spread your gospel message. Be with our students, be with the faculty and staff at all of our schools, and allow us to know that we truly are connected. We are there with one another doing your work. We're never alone, although sometimes in the classrooms with students surrounding us and the work that we have to do and all the ways that we are pulled, it may feel as though we are. We are never alone. We are constantly with one another, most importantly, with you as you walk with us every day as we work in our vocations, spreading your precious gospel message. Be with Michaela and Esther today the words of wisdom that they share, the encouragement, support that they provide, and be with us all. We ask questions and seek guidance and seek wisdom and support and encourage one another in our teaching ministry. All these things we ask in your son's name. Amen.
Well, today we decided to talk about parent-teacher conferences. We just finished them, or well, some people are still doing them at my school right now this week. And I know a lot of other schools have them coming up. And it is nearing the end of first quarter for some. And we just finished because we started a little bit early. And we want to be able to encourage all of you to feel confident towards what you do at conferences. And I know when I was first teaching, I felt nervous about them. Like, what are the parents going to think about my teaching? Are they going to have questions that I can't answer? And I had so many questions. But now that I understand that the purpose is really to come together. I just got someone saying that they can't hear me. Can anyone else hear me? Okay. So, okay.
No, I can hear you. You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Might be volume setting for someone on your computer.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So anyway, conferences are really a good opportunity to work together as a team with the parents. You're both there because you want to support that child. You want to support them in faith and their identity as a beloved child of God, as well as their academic instruction and their socialization and everything. And then when you put that mindset, when you start with that mindset that you guys are really blessed by this opportunity to have a conference, then it's a lot less stressful. Then it's okay not to have the answers right away. Another thing that helped me not stress about conferences was that I would plan for them. So if a parent requests a conference that's outside of the scheduled parent-teacher conference, for me, it's helpful to schedule it for 24 hours from the notification or something along those lines to give me time to process what their concern might be, and also to give them time to cool down if needed. Now, there are some instances where, depending on the relationship with the parent, I'll meet them right away. But in general, it's a good rule of thumb to wait 24 hours. As for school conferences, it's really helpful if your school or you send out conference times where they use a website to sign up, and it'll automatically remind them to sign up, or not to sign up, to come to the conference. And that was really helpful, especially this year. I had one parent forget that she accidentally double booked an appointment with something else. And so she was able to email me before the conference saying, hey, I accidentally double booked. Can you reschedule me? Easy peasy. It worked out so nicely that she was automatically reminded.
Yeah, and oldie but a goodie is Sign Up Genius. It does send out that notification to parents if you have it set up that way. So it's kind of old school, but it does the job. And people are familiar with it, which is nice. One other addition to what Esther was talking about, if a parent's requesting one, we just had a parent request for, I teach with another teacher, so you'll hear me say we a lot. But we got a request for a conference outside of our school conference times, and we weren't really sure why she wanted to meet. So instead of going into that meeting blind, don't be afraid to ask that parent, hey, could you just give me a heads up on what you want to talk about so that when you come in, I'm prepared, you're prepared, and it can be a productive conversation instead of being like, I don't know what they want to talk about. And now you're nervous and super worried about what this is about, where then you're able to come in a little bit more prepared.
I really like that idea. And if you're nervous about parent-teacher conferences, you can also send out something to all of the parents at like a Google form, asking them to say one thing that's going well for them, or something they really want to talk to you about at the conference to give you more time to prepare. Some teachers like doing that. Some people don't need it. So you'll have to figure out what works best for you. You can also decide for the parent-teacher conference time that most of the parents do, decide if you're going to have parent-teacher conferences or parent-teacher student conferences or student-led conferences. They all serve a little bit of a different purpose. They all can be beneficial, but you should ask other people at your school what they do and see if you can do something else if you really want to. It might be the case that all of you are supposed to do the same thing. So ask before just going against the grain. And then when you do plan your conferences, make sure that you schedule breaks for yourself, breaks to eat, breaks to use the restroom. And that'll give you also time to have a little bit of a brain break and go over any notes that you have for upcoming conferences or write down notes from past conferences.
And those breaks also let you prepare to have like kind of your stack of whatever you need for that next parent who's coming in ready to go, instead of like trying to prep it all. So you have like 5 ready right away. So you can just flow through. If you have those 10 minutes in between, it kind of gives you that break and mental time to change over to that next student. It's also important that if there's anything that you know you need to touch on for each meeting, that maybe even having a list. I know I was nervous my first time that I was going to skip something. So I just kind of had like a little list that I had out in front of me that was like, okay, make sure I talk about their grades, talk about the behaviors, anything that was upcoming, or if we had a field trip coming up, making sure I touched on that. If there's any big school events, just having that list available for you to reference to make sure that you're not trying to combine everything into your head, but you have something physical in front of you to be able to double check you're ticking off all the things you're trying to get through.
And you don't have to have all of those things memorized either.
No.
So you can have each thing in a file folder for each student so that you can go through that list and have stuff that you've already thought about, like their grades and their behaviors for the report cards and any test scores or student work. You can have that all ready to go so that if you freeze for a moment, you can just go in and refer to the things that you already have as a reference. And that'll take a lot of anxiety off of you for trying to keep track of certain test scores or certain seemingly minute details that a parent might ask about. At my school, we usually have the report cards, as I mentioned, and we also have their MAPS test scores. And then I like to have, depending on the year, student reflections and goals and examples of work to share with the families as well.
One thing that I did my first year, because I was a little worried, I wasn't really sure what to do, was I did a couple of versions of like a mock conference with my counterpart at that point. So I went into her classroom and I pretended to be the teacher, I was pretending to be the parent in her classroom, and she kind of walked through what she would do. So I could kind of get an idea of like, okay, these are the things you're going to touch on with your kindergarten parents. Now that gives me an idea of what I should touch on with mine. And then I was able to then bring her into my classroom once I was ready kind of with what my spiel was going to be, and was able to then be the teacher role with a mock parent, and kind of allowed me to kind of figure out what things I wanted to go a little bit smoother, making sure I wasn't missing any big chunks, and kind of the no pressure first conference that made me a little less nervous going into some of the real things with the other parents.
I also like inviting in other teachers that see that student. So this year, our resource teacher joined me for one of the conferences because we could both speak to the growth of that student. And sometimes I've used a resource teacher to help me figure out the relationship with the parents so that there could be a third or fourth person in the room to ease any tension. You can also let your administration know if you anticipate a stressful situation. They're happy to be there for you. They like being there for you. That is their job. And so just give them a heads up before before the conference is scheduled so that they can be readily available if you need it.
And while you're thinking through what people you might want to have in the room, kind of going back to if you're going to do it as a teacher-led or student-led conference, make sure you let parents know if you definitely don't want their kid there or if you definitely do want their kid there. Just because a lot of parents will kind of be wondering and they don't always ask. And then sometimes if you don't want the kid there, then they're trying to figure out things in your classroom they can go do in the hallway. Or if you did want them there and they're not there, then you're kind of thrown off. So just making sure parents are knowing what to expect on where they should leave their kid or bring their kid that day.
Now we are going to talk about setting the scene. So I like to have my students clean their desks and clean up the room before conferences. I put up their work in the hallway, or I have them put it up in the hallway so that parents have something to look at while they're waiting. And they like being able to find their students and kind of comparing where they're at in relation to the rest of the class. And sometimes I have them with names, sometimes without. And I also like to put comfortable chairs around our conference table. I have a circular table that we sit at, and I take away all of the fun yoga balls and the fun chairs because parents just need a sturdy, comfortable chair. So we have some big chairs that we put there instead. And then we can also put chairs outside for the parents as they're waiting for a conference. And I've seen other classes parents use those chairs as well. And so if you put them out in the hallway, it's a good reminder to other teachers to put them out. Just give parents a place to rest. I also think it's good to put a sign on the door instructing parents to knock at their scheduled conference time. That will help you wrap up the conference, and it'll help the parents wrap it up because they know another parent is waiting for them. I also like to post the conference sessions for parents to see. Sometimes I include the times, other times I just include the name. And that way they don't see when I have a break, because I've found that when I do say that I have a break, 50% of the time a parent will say, "Oh, you have a break, so I know that you can keep going." And it's so important for you to respect yourself enough to say that you need that break because you have to take care of yourself. And so that just helps me with it at all, or with it in general.
And Esther mentioned that she kind of uses a circle table when she does hers. We have a beam table, but thinking about even just the table that you're using during your conference, it's important that you're trying to share information with the parent. So you don't want to be on something that your computer is only facing you if you're trying to show them things on your computer screen, or you're stretching all the way across the table trying to show them this piece of paper. Just thinking through your space that, well, you want to make sure they have comfy chairs, also that the space is workable with the fact you're trying to work together as a team.
Yes. And that's why we don't typically have conferences across of our teacher's desk either, because we don't want to look like I'm the only authority in the room. Really, we are coming together as a team. And so even when I'm at the circular table, instead of being directly across from someone, we kind of go like we're at a 90-degree angle so that we can both take a look at the information that we're sharing. And it looks like we're having coffee together and working on a shared goal. And then go time. When the conference begins, I like to welcome people in, thank them for coming. And then when we sit down, take a deep breath and begin with prayer. If you're nervous about praying with parents, then write it out. I have gotten so many compliments from parents saying that it was so good to start off in prayer. It was refreshing for them and it calmed their nerves. So we do that. And then Michaela, you have another way to calm their nerves?
Yeah, another thing is you definitely want to start with something positive. Don't just jump right into the thing that you are concerned about with their kid, because they're already coming in. Just like you're nervous, what is this parent going to say to me? They're thinking, oh gosh, this is the teacher who spends so much time with my kid. What if my kid's completely terrible and they just haven't told me yet? What if they're failing everything? and they're very nervous. So starting with something positive, you can always find some positives about each of your students. So starting with one of those things is super important at the beginning, and then also tying it up at the end with one of those is always helpful too. So as they leave, even if it kind of got a little intense in the middle or a little worrisome for the parent, they're at least leaving and starting on that good note of something positive.
Yes. And when you are mentioning something that is a concern, use I statements. I notice, and then continue on. That'll help put it on you for noticing, and it doesn't shame the child. And you really want to uplift the child, but still state what needs to be changed so that they can continue to grow. I also leave time for parents to ask questions or state any concerns. Some conferences, I do this at the beginning to make sure I address anything before I get into it. Other conferences, I actually get through what I have to say first, anticipating that maybe what they have to hear or from me, I feel like is very important. And if I know that they're going to take a long time to say what they want to say, then at least I can finish that. So you'll know your parents to know if you should ask them or give them that platform at the beginning or at the end, but do ask them because their concerns are something that you can work together on as a team. Like if homework is taking 4 hours, work together on that, because just by giving them little tips and tricks, like setting a 20-minute timer for one activity and then being done, those little tips help them, and they want your help.
Mm-hmm. And Esther kind of mentioned this part before as well, but once you get into that schedule, you really want to stick to your time. Not only is it respecting your time, but it's also respecting the time of those parents who are coming in after that first parent. You can set a timer if it helps you. I personally don't set a timer, but other people really like that because having that visual for them is helpful. So you could give that a try. And if that timer goes off and you're still in the middle of a conversation, you can always schedule a second conference or meeting with the family. The other side of that too is just because you have this 20-minute time to fill, don't feel like you have to fill the 20 minutes. If you have a kid that you really don't have concerns about, they're doing great academically, it's okay to not have a ton to say about a kid. Don't feel like you have to fill that time. Congrats, you just got yourself an extra 10-minute break. So I know sometimes like I feel like, oh, I've got to keep talking because they're here, they're expecting 20 minutes from me. But most parents, if they walk in and you're like, you know what, I really don't have a ton to share with you. Your kid's great in class. They're doing great and on math and in reading. I don't have any concerns. Do you have any? And they say no. It's fine if that's where it ends. Some will go that way and that's not a bad thing. But if they keep going on and on, it's okay to then say, hey, let's pause and let's set up another time that we can talk. If you do have any concerns too, it can be really nerve-wracking to bring them up. But in the long run, especially in this first quarter, if you can start working as a team with that parent, whether it's something academic or behavioral, or maybe you've noticed something with speech or like OT, or maybe something that a title person could work with, getting them into those things earlier in the year is better in the long run for those kids, because it also then helps them jump into it right away in the next year because they don't need to retest right away to get back in. So it kind of gets them set up for the rest of your year and their next year, the sooner that you can get them into that. And the parents can't help you if they don't know what your concerns are. So just like you're going to ask them what their concerns are, you have to be willing to share yours with them, even if it seems uncomfortable and you're worried how that parent will react. At the end of the day, you can't be a team working for the success of that student if you're not willing to share what you're seeing in the classroom, because they don't know, they're not there. But really focusing then at that point that you and that parent are a team and your sole goal is for the success of their child. So it's not focusing on the issue of that they kept picking their nose in class. Like that's not the thing to focus on. You really want to focus that, hey, we need him to stop doing that because he can't focus on his work. So what are we going to do? Right then be able to take the time to maybe figure out what the next plan is, what the next steps are to help them be successful.
Yes. And as you're talking about the next steps, take notes about what each party is going to do for the next steps, and then follow up on it as soon as you can. So if you implement a new strategy, follow up in a few days on how that's going. And for sure, by the end of the week or 2 weeks, oftentimes strategies take about 2 weeks to for you to see if they're really going to work or not. And so have that follow up. And then if you need another meeting after that, then you can. I like to take notes on just a Post-it note so that it looks more like a note to myself rather than a formal evaluation, because sometimes that can make parents nervous. So one year I did have that, we both wrote on it and I had parents sign it to show that we did conferences, and then I found out that that just made them nervous. So now I just do Post-it notes and it's a lot easier. So conferences are a blessing. They really do help us help the children. Parents typically want to help you help their child. And so they oftentimes will talk to the child after the conference. And sometimes they'll check back in with you to see if you see any improvement as well. Other people will increase their reading minutes at home or work more on math facts or things like that. So share what you need from them. And especially at our Lutheran schools, most people will help you.
Definitely. For people who are here, if you have any questions or anything that you were thinking of, well, we kind of went through our whole spiel. We kind of open up now. If there's any questions, you can send them through the chat, or if you just want to talk and ask them, if you're in here, you can do that as well.
I just wanted to say hi, everyone. I'm Katie PC. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself at the beginning. I was trying to figure out Zoom or figure out the Zoom on my phone because I needed a transfer to a new appointment. But you ladies did a wonderful job. I'm the Director of Field Experience at Concordia Chicago. And so thank you very much for presenting all of that today. After being a classroom teacher for 20 years, you did an excellent job presenting what you just did. So wonderful. And I think our Lutheran schools are wonderful to have these type of resources. So thank you for doing what you did today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the encouragement, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry that I'm kind of driving and listening. So I appreciate definitely, but I'm here and I listen. So
Thank you.
For Michaela, we do have a question from Facebook for you. Can you clarify the difference between student-led and teacher-led conference?
Yeah, so the student-led would be something along the lines of the kid being the one that you ask more questions to, and you ask the kid of like, oh, like what is going well in school this year? What things do you feel like you're struggling with? And you kind of let the kid take the lead on it. And then through what the kid is answering, you're able to then implement what your concerns are or what you also see as positives for that child. And it allows the kid to kind of play a role in the conference. Whereas the teacher-led is more of where you're going to have your information and your reports, and you're more likely sitting with just the parents, and you kind of go through your information based off of what you have for them. So both are possible. I kind of like to do a paper from the kids that kind of answers the questions, where it's like something you're really enjoying in first grade, something that you want to get better at in first grade, and something you're excited for, something like that. And then I'll present the piece of paper to the parents instead, and then they're able to kind of see their writing and their spelling that way, without them necessarily needing to bring their kid. But that's kind of the difference between the two.
And I think that's a really good happy medium between the two, especially for first grade. I've been teaching fourth grade now for 7 years, and I've done a few years of student-led and other parent-teacher, and yet other where everyone's present, but I'll take the lead. When I do student-led conferences, I'll work with the students about 1 or 2 weeks before the conference. And when I normally would be meeting one-on-one with them to talk about their writing, that's when I would instead for that week talk with them about conferences. So I would give them all a paper and we would talk about we would talk about their grades so far for the year, or which standards they've been working on. And then they would make their own goals. So we would have a glow and a grow, usually about 3 glows for 4th grade and 2 grows, ways that they're going to hopefully improve or grow. And I allowed one to be, I hoped for one to be about a behavior for most kids, and one to be academic. And sometimes we would replace one with a personal goal for outside of school too. And students enjoyed doing that because they felt empowered. And some of them would even dress up in a suit and take us through it. And they would lead the prayer. We would write it together ahead of time and practice it. And it was a good way to see, or for parents to see how capable their students were. But I got some feedback from parents. A lot of parents really liked the student-led conferences to see what their child was capable of and to hear their goals from their own mouths. But I did have 1 or 2 parents say that they would have preferred to have a time with me to go over where their child ranks nationally by looking at the tests. And so they felt like it was good to schedule an additional meeting to actually talk about strengths and weaknesses, and should they go to the pediatrician and ask the pediatrician about ADHD and all sorts of those things that they didn't want to mention in front of their students until they were more sure about themselves or their ideas. Do we have any other questions or clarifying questions or any other questions?
Well,
I had a
if I remember right, we also, and then you can get to the next question. I think we have some forms out there available via Google Docs too that we can share just to, guide and help you write things down. And I always think that's important. You mentioned all those things, great advice. And also, just as another reminder, if you really think something's going to be a difficult conference, one, practice beforehand. That was great advice. Just sit down with somebody. And then if it's going to be a parent that you think, this, I don't want it to go south. If it could, there's been some email things or whatever else, just ask your principal to walk the halls by your room just in case. That's why you have administrators there too. And just, that person is out there in case something does happen. Not that it will, but it just gives you that extra sense, and it provides that support you might need.
Thank you for sharing that. Anna, you said you had a question.
I did. What would your guys' thoughts or suggestions be for parents who don't reach out to attend a conference or anything?
My first thing would be that just when you do send it out, making sure that you send it in multiple ways. If it's a parent that the conference is probably going to go kind of like one of those shorter ones I mentioned earlier where everything's fine and dandy, then it's probably not a huge deal whether or not you talk to them. But if it's one that you're like, hey, I really want to meet with this parent because there's some things that I see that I want to be able to talk about, making sure that you send out the schedule or however you're having them sign up multiple ways. And then even reaching out to them personally, either by email, or depending if you see them in person. I would maybe, the way we have our school set up, I would go out to the car at pickup time and say, hey, conferences are coming up. I noticed you haven't signed up. If you need me to send the link again, let me know. And just kind of continually kind of poke at it until they kind of finally figure it out and sign up for a time. I guess those would be my suggestions. It's kind of one of those things that eventually the parent has to decide that they care enough to sign up.
Mhm. And if you do decide that you really need to meet with them and they can't, or they haven't signed up yet, you can also call them and you can offer a Zoom conference. They don't have to leave work for that even. They can just do it on their lunch break or your lunch break. Not that that gives you a break, so maybe not that. But if you offer to Zoom with them, that oftentimes pushes them to come in and say, oh, no, it's okay. I'll figure out another time. Are you free next week in the evening? And I've had pretty good success with that.
Yeah, being flexible with those parents is super important because it could just be that when they looked at it, they're like, oh, none of these times work. And they just didn't send back the email saying, oh, hey, is there another time that we could do this? Because we're on vacation. Sometimes they just kind of miss that and everything that they have going on as well.
Yeah, awesome advice. I just would add a little bit. Sometimes, depending on the school that you're in, there are barriers that prevent them from attending conferences that sometimes you don't think about. So, it could be that they just are missing it. It could be the Zoom event's great because it could break down some of those barriers. So think about that too, and even ask that question. Is there something, your work schedule, something else that might prevent this, and how can we overcome that obstacle to communicate successfully?
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I noticed in the chat that Will posted a link to our Google Drive that has an example prayer that you might want to use or an example draft of what to have students fill out or what you want to fill out so that you can hit everything you want to talk about.
We have another question from Facebook. Are all conferences held on site or do teachers use Zoom methods? So online, different ways to connect online for conferences.
Good question. We hold all of ours in person now, but kind of what we were saying before, if there was a parent that for some reason couldn't come in person, I would then with that parent offer the Zoom option if that's what would be better. I've also had some parents at my school request just over the phone instead, and then you'd be able to send the documents home with the student, like a report card or testing scores or anything like that. But it's really just being flexible, but I would prefer personally being able to do it in person just because then everybody's kind of on an equal playing field. I'm prepared, the parents prepared, you're in a setting that has you both kind of in the mindset for the conversations you're about to have personally.
Yeah, I agree. I prefer the in-person ones. And so I don't give the option of a Zoom one until I hear that there's a barrier, and then I'll offer it. Are there any other questions or concerns about conferences or things that you're excited about?
I think you all nailed it. Dr. Freeman just texted me. He says he has to hop off so he can catch his ride back to a conference. So, we're going to start the game. So watch our social media channels for where on earth is Dr. Freeman. It'll be great. Michaela Astor, thank you so much for sharing just everything about conferences. It's always a scary topic. I remember the first time I was a teacher doing the parent conferences, and you kind of walk in and you're like, all right, I'm ready, and then you get a curveball thrown at you. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you everybody for joining us on Facebook, X, YouTube, and Zoom here, and blessings on your night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Blessings on everyone's nights and blessings on your conferences.
All right, we're going to end it now. But again, thank you again. And make sure you join us next month for our next new teacher support and encouragement Zoom.